Whew, so much going on in the world. Got a couple scriptures for you that may sound like they're not related to begin with, but I hope after talking a few minutes, you'll kind of see how these tie together, not just with what I'm going to say, but also in our current situation here. Uh, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. 2 Timothy 4:3. For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. Now you're probably going, wait a minute, what do those two things have in common? What are you talking about? We are at a time with our political system, with the coronavirus going on, with all of this, that we are more divided than I have ever seen our nation in my 50 years of living. And in my reading of history, there have been some interesting times, but I don't see any point where we were anywhere near as divided against each other, against our neighbors, against anybody who felt or thought a little bit differently as I see now. We're filled with malice and rage and anger, and it comes all the way from our president and Speaker of the House, who really have nothing kind to say about each other, from the examples that they set all the way down to the lowest rungs. And it pervades the church as well. If you make the mistake of going through social media, and I've actually cut back on how much I even look at it because of how bad it is, when you see the posts from Christians, there's a lot of anger and rage and harsh language and unkindness towards people who think differently than them. In fact, there's just a lot of garbage as a whole on social media. People say things they would never say to somebody in person. And unfortunately, our political system and coronavirus have made it worse. One of the things that we've always been kind of as a people is gullible. I can remember as a young man and as a child, chain letters coming in the mail, that if you take this letter and if you copy it and then remail it out to 7 friends and put your name at the bottom of the list, that a great blessing will come to you. We would occasionally get those in the mail, we'd laugh at them and throw them away. Well, with the advent of the internet, it became much easier to do this because no longer did you actually have to write it out or make copies and then lick the envelopes and put the stamps on, but now you can just send it instantly with an email. Well, then social media comes along. Goodness, you don't even have to do that. You just hit share and it's done. And people never even look at the source of what they're sharing. They don't even consider, is this real or legitimate? I can't tell you how many people tell me, well, it might be true, so it's good to share. We no longer care about honesty and integrity. We just post it. We don't examine our sources. As a nation, we have really forgotten how to think critically, to analyze information, to verify things. My wife, when she attempts to assign a research paper to her students, it's like war, because why on earth should I have to research and know anything? And so we pass around a lot of lies, to the point where if God were to look at us and say, are you being a true prophet or a false prophet? There's a lot of false prophets in churches today because of what they spread on social media. A lot of what you see going around, folks, about the coronavirus is blatant misinformation. And let me just hit one. Bill Gates is not the Antichrist, nor is he working with the Antichrist. Nor is he going to be injecting computer chips through a vaccine to take over the world. Reality check, it's impossible. Chips aren't that small. They can't be that small yet. If that ever happens, it's ways down the road. And before the mark of the beast ever happens, is what people are trying to argue, you still have to have 7 seals and the scrolls opened up first, and 5 trumpets. Don't forget Revelation 4 through 7 or 8. Context, folks. We're passing around fear, we're passing around lies, we're passing around all sorts of stuff. We're encouraging false documentaries. There was one that just went around recently that it reminded me of the old Michael Moore documentaries that were all false, bunk, garbage. And now we're doing it from the other, but we're doing it in the name of God. And then we're yelling and screaming at anybody who dares question it. Because, if they don't agree with us and if they don't see that this is true, even though it's completely false, well, then they're a bleep, 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 and we have nothing kind to say about them. We have turned the witness of the church into a bunch of arrogant, unloving liars. Wow. How so unlike what Jesus modeled. Jesus always spoke truth, never allowed a false word to come from himself, didn't have harsh words for others unless they were arrogant, self-righteous religious leaders. Think about that. Look at every harsh word he says, and who is it directed at? It's at the arrogant, self-righteous leaders. It's not at the people seeking after truth. And yet that's what we are so often today. And it's what we push and what we propagate. And then we go, well, why aren't people coming to repentance? Because the honest truth, if I was not saved and my example of Christianity was what I see on social media and from people who should know better, I wouldn't want any part of it. Thank God I wasn't raised in church. When I see that stuff, I'm like, oh, Lord, don't let me ever become like that. Because that's not you. We're supposed to follow you and the example you led. And what is your example? It's service. It's servanthood. It's blessing other people. It's kindness. It's gentleness. It's healing. It's providing. And we're not doing that. We're yelling and screaming because we've got our political views in the wrong place. We're filled with malice. We're filled with slander. And we're supposed to be filled with Him. It's a hard thing when I see that. We've had 100,000 people die now from coronavirus. 100,000. Okay, we hit that threshold yesterday. That is more people than the Korean War and the Vietnam War combined. That is about 35 Pearl Harbors. 35. The town I live near, Springfield, it almost wipes that whole town out, the whole city. That's a lot of people. We had 18,000 plus get confirmed diagnosis yesterday, and free testing still isn't available. Most people can't get tested. It's bigger than it is. And the people in church, rather than showing compassion and caring and concern, are far more screaming about their rights, and we shouldn't have to wear masks, and why do we have to social distance? I go out to the store in a mask because I've got people I know that have it. And while I'm sure I haven't been exposed, I don't know if the people around me have, and I don't want it. And I get dirty looks. I mean, rude looks. Because I'm more concerned about safety and caring about the people around me and making sure it's not passed on. How dare I? And a lot of these people giving me looks are good, well-meaning Christians. We should be the first ones to be thinking about those around us. We should be the first ones concerned about their health and well-being. We should be the first ones concerned to make sure that we don't get it, we don't pass it on, we don't play chances and get risky. We should be the first ones serving and saying, what can we do to help make this better? The first Christians, when the plague was going around, it was the Christians that were going into the plague-filled homes and serving people. And yes, getting infected and dying sometimes because they were serving people. Because they were more concerned about that. You look back in the times of the Romans, and when they had diseases go around, it was the Christians, the followers of Christ, his disciples after he died, that were going out serving the sick and the ill and the hurting and risking their lives while still being cautious, knowing what they were doing. Here we're risking our lives because we don't care. Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. In our case, we're like, our enemy is anybody who disagrees with us. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And I pray for those who give me those rotten looks. No, it's not true persecution, but I pray for them, that their heart breaks. That you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing more than others? Don't even the pagans do the same? Actually, the real word in Greek is the Gentiles. If you only care about the people who agree with you, you're doing it wrong. If you're only willing to serve and submit to those who have the same views you do, you're doing it wrong. That's not who Jesus called us to serve. We are to love and bless our enemies. We are to love and bless those who disagree with us. If we let an insult, an offense, a swear word, a curse cross our lips, we are not following the example that Jesus set for us. In fact, we're outright violating it. I made the mistake on social media for a little while trying to dispute some of the false information going around. Lots of it. And I had Christians, leaders, elders, board members, pastors send me some vicious, mean-spirited messages, call me all sorts of stuff because I dared to point out that, hey, this isn't true. Go look it up. How dare you tell me to look it up, you so-and-so? This is what's happening. This is what I want to believe, and because I want to believe it, it must be true. And we're pushing political views and social paradigms and conspiracy theories and hatred and division and malice and slander and lies. And we're pushing it in the name of Christ because it's a worldview that we want to hold to and it's an agenda that we want to push. Instead of pushing the gospel. Instead of living the gospel. At one point, will we get our pride and our arrogance out of the way and say, I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, let me serve you, let me help you. What can I do to bless you? This is real. This is real, folks. 100,000 dead. Over 1.3 million infected that we know of, and lots more that we don't because we're not testing. At what point are we going to get off of our high horse and say, let's bring this under control. Let's serve each other. Let's love our neighbors. Let's show compassion and care for their concerns, their worries, their fears. Let me bless them and help them so we can take care of it. When are we going to stop shouting and screaming for our rights, which Jesus never did, and instead start saying, you're more important than my rights that don't really exist anyways. You're more important than whether I'm comfortable or not. You're more important than whether I think I'm living by fear, because if you're living by fear, I want to bring comfort to you, not be arrogant in your face. When are we going to shift our focus, stop spreading lies and being false prophets, and instead start being disciples and followers of Jesus and loving those around us? Because until we do, it's not going to change. It's not going to get better. We're going to continue to propagate stuff. Nobody's going to respect us. We're going to alienate ourselves from the rest of the world over a pack of lies and garbage. And Jesus is going to turn to us at some point. And we're going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do all this in your name? And Jesus is going to look at us and say, be gone, you doers of evil. I never knew you. God, forgive us. God, forgive us. And help us to follow you instead.